As the sun began its descent into a kaleidoscope of oranges and purples, the boarding area buzzed with anticipation. Travelers clutched their carry-ons, earbuds, and snacks as they shuffled onto Flight 327, bound for New York City. Among the passengers was a middle-aged man named Daniel, dressed casually in a polo shirt, jeans, and a red Make America Great Again hat perched atop his head. He was a quiet figure, blending seamlessly into the crowd. Just another traveler with a destination. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The flight crew was busy performing their usual pre-boarding rituals. Among them was a flight attendant named Clara, a seasoned professional with a keen eye for details and an unwavering commitment to ensuring the comfort and safety of passengers. Clara took pride in her work, always striving to make each flight as smooth as possible. But on this day, something about Daniel's hat caught her attention, sparking a growing unease. As passengers settled into their seats, Clara conducted her final checks. When she walked past Daniel in his first-class seat, the sight of his MAGA hat made her pause. Clara had heard stories, some exaggerated, others real, of passengers creating disturbances over political symbols, and she worried this flight might spiral into chaos. She returned to the galley and whispered to her colleague Amanda, "Did you see the guy in 3A? He's wearing that MAGA hat. You know how people get about that stuff." Amanda glanced over but shrugged. "He looks harmless to me, probably just wants to get to New York like everyone else." Clara wasn't so sure. As boarding concluded and the doors closed, her unease grew. She decided she couldn't take the chance of letting things escalate in midair. Approaching Daniel's seat, Clara put on her best professional smile, masking her inner turmoil. "Sir," she began, her voice calm but firm, "I'm going to have to ask you to remove your hat. It might offend other passengers and cause unnecessary tension during the flight." Daniel looked up from his book, his expression puzzled but polite. "I don't see how my hat is hurting anyone," he replied. "I'm just sitting here minding my own business." Clara's demeanor stiffened. "It's a precaution," she said. "We want to ensure everyone feels comfortable during the flight." By now, a few passengers were craning their necks to see what the commotion was about. Daniel sighed, sensing the conversation wasn't going to end easily. "I'm not taking it off," he said evenly. "I have every right to wear it." Clara felt her pulse quicken. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "If you don't comply, I'll have to ask you to leave the plane." Daniel's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "You're going to kick me off the flight over a hat?" he asked. His tone remained calm, but there was steel in his words. By now, the murmurs of nearby passengers were growing louder. A man seated behind Daniel chimed in. "Come on, lady, let him be. It's just a hat." Clara ignored the interruption, doubling down on her stance. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, her voice growing sharper. "But if you don't comply, I'll have to involve the captain." Daniel exhaled slowly, setting his book aside. His patience was wearing thin. "You're making a mistake," he said. "But if you insist, go ahead and call the captain." Clara marched to the cockpit, explaining the situation to Captain Mitchell, who had been reviewing flight plans. The captain listened patiently, his expression neutral. When she finished, he stood and followed her back to the cabin. "Sir," Captain Mitchell began, his tone measured, "I've been informed of the situation. Can we resolve this without further disruption?" Daniel met the captain's gaze, his voice calm but resolute. "I'm not disrupting anything. She's the one making an issue out of a hat. I bought a ticket and I'm sitting here like everyone else. This isn't about safety or comfort. This is about her bias." Clara bristled at the accusation. "It's not bias," she countered. "It's about maintaining peace on board." The captain hesitated, weighing his options. Before he could speak, Daniel reached into his carry-on and pulled out a folder. "Maybe this will clear things up," he said, handing it to the captain. Captain Mitchell opened the folder and scanned its contents. His eyes widened slightly as he flipped through the documents, which included an ownership certificate for the airline they were on. He looked back at Daniel, his expression shifting from skepticism to astonishment. "You own the airline?" the captain asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Daniel nodded. "That's correct. I don't make a habit of announcing it, but I think it's relevant now. And for the record, I have no intention of removing my hat or leaving this plane." The revelation hit Clara like a thunderbolt. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment as the implications of her actions sank in. She had not only misjudged Daniel, but had also jeopardized her professional reputation by threatening the owner of the very airline she worked for. Passengers around them, who had been eavesdropping with growing interest, began whispering among themselves. Some chuckled, while others offered Daniel supportive nods. Captain Mitchell cleared his throat, addressing Clara. "This situation has been resolved. Please ensure Mr. Daniels is treated with the respect he deserves." Clara stammered, struggling to find her words. I didn't know," she mumbled. "I was just trying to..." Let's focus on completing this flight smoothly, the captain interjected, sparing her further humiliation. He turned to Daniel. I apologize for the misunderstanding, sir. Please let me know if there's anything we can do to make your flight more comfortable. Daniel nodded, his expression softening slightly. Thank you, Captain. I appreciate your professionalism. As the captain returned to the cockpit, Clara stood frozen, her face pale. She mumbled an apology to Daniel before retreating to the galley. Her colleagues, who had been watching the drama unfold, exchanged wary glances but said nothing. The flight resumed its routine, but the atmosphere remained charged. Passengers exchanged knowing glances and whispered speculations. Daniel, for his part, returned to his book, seemingly unbothered by the commotion he had caused, or rather endured. For the rest of the flight, Clara avoided eye contact with Daniel, her earlier confidence replaced with quiet remorse. When the plane landed in New York, she hesitated before approaching him as passengers disembarked. Sir, she began hesitantly, I want to sincerely apologize for how I handled the situation. It was unprofessional and unfair. Daniel regarded her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he offered a small smile. We all make mistakes, he said. What matters is learning from them. Clara nodded, grateful for his graciousness. As he walked down the jet bridge and into the bustling terminal, she stood rooted in place, vowing to never let her assumptions cloud her judgment again. The incident left a lasting impression on everyone involved. Passengers shared their stories on social media, and the tale of the flight attendant who tried to remove the airline's owner over a hat quickly went viral. Some criticized Clara for overreacting, while others debated the broader implications of political symbols in public spaces. For Daniel, the episode was a reminder of the complexities of modern society and the importance of standing firm in one's convictions. For Clara, it was a humbling lesson in the dangers of jumping to conclusions. As the story circulated, one thing became clear. Sometimes the most unexpected encounters can teach the most valuable lessons. Clara's steps echoed softly as she retreated from the gate area, her mind swirling with the fallout of the incident. It wasn't just the professional embarrassment, though that was significant. It was the realization that she had allowed her personal assumptions to cloud her judgment. As the bustling airport terminal faded behind her, she resolved to address what had happened in a way that would bring clarity and growth. Meanwhile, Daniel exited the terminal, met by a driver waiting for him by a sleek black sedan. The events of the flight lingered in his thoughts, though not with anger. If anything, Daniel felt a sense of calm resolve. He wasn't naive. As the owner of a major airline, he was no stranger to public scrutiny or strong opinions about his political beliefs. But this incident wasn't about a hat. It was about a broader issue that extended far beyond a single flight. As the car weaved through New York's labyrinthine streets, Daniel's mind turned to his responsibilities as a business owner. He had acquired the airline years ago, not as a vanity project, but as an opportunity to bring a sense of fairness and innovation to an industry plagued with inefficiencies. His focus had always been on providing exceptional service and fostering a culture of inclusivity among his employees. Yet today's encounter had highlighted an uncomfortable truth. Even within his organization, biases could surface in unexpected ways. By the time he reached his hotel, Daniel had made up his mind. This incident needed to be addressed head-on, not to punish anyone, but to set a clear example of how his airline should handle such situations in the future. He reached for his laptop and began drafting a letter to the airline's leadership team, recounting the events and emphasizing the importance of training employees to approach every passenger with respect, regardless of personal opinions or preconceived notions. Back at the airline's headquarters, Clara's actions were already the subject of discussion. Word of the incident had spread rapidly, thanks to a handful of passengers who had live-tweeted the drama as it unfolded. Social media was ablaze with opinions, ranging from outrage at Clara's behavior to admiration for Daniel's composed response. Within hours, the airline's public relations team had been alerted, and executives were scrambling to manage the fallout. Clara, meanwhile, spent a sleepless night replaying the encounter in her mind. She knew the incident would likely result in a formal review, but her anxiety was less about the potential consequences and more about the deep-seated disappointment she felt in herself. She had always prided herself on her professionalism, yet she had allowed her personal biases to take the wheel. As the first rays of dawn broke through her apartment window, Clara resolved to face whatever came next with honesty and accountability. 2 days later, Clara was called into a meeting with her supervisor, a no-nonsense woman named Rebecca, who had been with the airline for over 2 decades. Rebecca didn't mince words as she laid out the gravity of the situation. "Clara," she began, "I've reviewed the incident report and I've also read the passenger statements. There's no denying that you overstepped. The The passenger in question didn't exhibit any disruptive behavior, and your decision to confront him was based purely on personal assumptions. That's not how we operate. Clara nodded, her posture tense but her gaze steady. I understand, and I take full responsibility. I acted out of fear of potential conflict, but I see now that I created the very situation I was trying to avoid. Rebecca studied her for a moment, her expression softening slightly. It's clear you're remorseful, and I appreciate your willingness to own up to your mistake. However, this incident has shown a spotlight on a larger issue. It's not just about you, Clara. It's about ensuring all of our staff are equipped to handle situations like this with fairness and sensitivity. To Clara's surprise, Rebecca continued, Mr. Daniels, has reached out to us personally. He's requested that we use this incident as a learning opportunity, not just for you, but for the entire team. Clara blinked, caught off guard. He requested that? Rebecca nodded. He believes in addressing issues constructively, and frankly, I agree with him. We're going to implement a new round of bias awareness training across the company, starting with flight attendants. And Clara, I want you to play a role in shaping that training. Clara's eyes widened. Me? Why would I? Because you've lived this experience, Rebecca interrupted. You understand where things went wrong and you're clearly committed to making amends. Who better to help ensure this doesn't happen again? Though the idea intimidated her, Clara couldn't deny it felt like a chance to redeem herself. I'll do it, she said finally, determination flickering in her voice. As the weeks passed, the airline rolled out its new training program, which included sessions on implicit bias, conflict resolution, and cultural sensitivity. Clara worked closely with the training team, sharing her story candidly and helping to develop scenarios that would encourage employees to think critically about their assumptions. The program was met with a mix of curiosity and skepticism from employees, many of whom were initially resistant to the idea. But as they engaged in role-playing exercises and open discussions, it became clear that the training was fostering a deeper understanding of how biases could impact their interactions with passengers and each other. For Clara, the experience was transformative. Not only did it allow her to rebuild her confidence, but it also deepened her empathy for others. She began to see her role as a flight attendant in a new light, not just as a provider of service, but as a bridge between people from all walks of life. While the airline was navigating its internal reforms, Daniel's quiet act of leadership was gaining public attention. News outlets picked up on the story, framing him as a model of grace under pressure. Interviews with passengers from the flight painted him as a composed and empathetic individual who had turned a tense situation into an opportunity for growth. Daniel, however, remained humble about the incident. When asked about it during a rare media appearance, he deflected attention away from himself and emphasized the importance of fostering mutual respect in all aspects of life. Months later, the airline was reaping the benefits of its revamped training program. Customer satisfaction scores improved, and employee morale rose as staff members felt more equipped to handle challenging situations. Clara, who had initially feared the incident would mark the end of her career, found herself thriving in her role as a mentor and advocate for continuous learning. One day, as she prepared for a flight, Clara noticed a familiar face boarding the plane. It was Daniel, his red MAGA hat notably absent this time. Though her heart raced with nervousness, Clara approached him with a smile. "Mr. Daniels," she said, her voice steady. "Welcome aboard." Daniel looked up, recognition sparking in his eyes. "Clara," he said warmly, "it's good to see you again." They exchanged pleasantries, and Clara couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. As the plane soared into the sky, she reflected on how much had changed since their first encounter. What had begun as a moment of tension and misunderstanding had evolved into an opportunity for growth and connection, a testament to the power of humility, accountability, and the willingness to learn from one's mistakes. As the flight continued, Daniel reclined in his seat, glancing out the window at the clouds below. He felt a quiet satisfaction, not just in the changes he had helped inspire within the airline, but in the broader message the experience had conveyed. In a world often divided by differences, moments of shared humanity were what truly mattered. And sometimes, it only took a single conversation to bring those moments to light. As the months turned into a year since the incident, Clara's life had undergone a profound transformation. What could have been the lowest point of her career had turned into a journey of self-reflection, growth, and unexpected fulfillment. She had not only embraced her new role as an advocate for fairness and respect within the airline, but had also become a sought-after speaker on issues of workplace empathy and communication. Her reputation as someone who had turned a mistake into a meaningful lesson spread beyond the airline industry. Invitations began to pour in from conferences, leadership workshops, and even universities. Clara found herself standing on stages in front of hundreds of people, sharing the story of her misstep and how it had propelled her toward a deeper understanding of human connection. One particularly memorable event took place at an international aviation conference in Chicago. The audience included executives, flight crew members, and aviation enthusiasts from around the world. Clara stood at the podium, a mix of nervousness and determination coursing through her. "I'm not here as someone who got it all right," she began, her voice steady but emotional. "I'm here because I made a mistake, one that forced me to confront my assumptions and grow in ways I never imagined. That moment on the plane wasn't just about a hat or a passenger. It was about how we, as individuals and professionals, carry our biases into our work and how those biases can cloud our judgment." The room was silent, captivated by her candor. Clara went on to describe the training programs she had helped implement and the countless conversations she'd had with her colleagues about the challenges of navigating a world so often divided by ideology. Her words resonated deeply, and by the time she stepped down from the stage, she was met with a standing ovation. Among those in the crowd was Daniel, who had been invited to the conference as a keynote speaker. He watched Clara with a mixture of pride and admiration. Her journey mirrored the values he had always tried to instill in his company: humility, accountability, and the courage to face difficult truths. Later that evening, Daniel approached Clara during a networking event. The room buzzed with conversation, but when he greeted her, she turned to him with a warm smile. "Mr. Daniels," she said, shaking his hand, "I didn't know you'd be here." "I wouldn't miss it," he replied. "You were incredible up there, Clara. You've taken what happened and turned it into something meaningful, not just for you, but for everyone who's heard your story." Clara blushed slightly but met his gaze. "It's thanks to you," she said. "If you hadn't handled the situation with so much grace, I don't think I'd have had the courage to face it the way I did." Daniel chuckled softly. "I think you're giving me too much credit. The truth is, it wasn't easy for me either. I've faced my share of criticism for wearing that hat. But that day, I realized something important. It's not about what you wear or what you believe. It's about how we treat each other, especially in moments of conflict." Their conversation continued well into the evening, touching on everything from leadership philosophies to the challenges of maintaining integrity in a polarized world. By the end of the night, Clara felt a newfound sense of camaraderie with Daniel. Despite their different roles, they were united by a shared commitment to fostering understanding and respect. The changes within the airline continued to ripple outward. The bias awareness training program became a model for other companies in the industry, with several airlines adopting similar initiatives. Employees reported feeling more confident in their ability to handle sensitive situations, and incidents of passenger complaints related to perceived bias dropped significantly. Clara's colleagues began to see her in a new light, not just as a fellow flight attendant but as a leader. She was frequently sought out for advice, and her reputation as a compassionate and insightful mentor grew. Clara discovered a passion for helping others navigate their own challenges, whether it was a difficult passenger interaction or a personal struggle with confidence. One day, during a routine flight to Los Angeles, Clara was approached by a young flight attendant named Mia. Nervous and fidgeting with her hands, Mia confided in Clara that she had recently faced a situation similar to Clara's infamous encounter. A passenger had made a remark that Mia found offensive, and she had struggled to respond professionally. "I didn't know what to do," Mia admitted, her voice trembling. "I was afraid of making it worse, but I also didn't want to ignore it." Clara listened attentively, nodding as Mia spoke. When she responded, her tone was gentle but firm. "Mia, the most important thing is to stay grounded in empathy. Take a moment to breathe and try to understand where the other person is coming from. It doesn't mean you have to accept disrespect, but it does mean you can approach the situation with clarity and kindness." Mia seemed to relax, her shoulders loosening as Clara's words sank in. "Thank you," she said. "I've heard about what happened with you, and honestly, it's inspiring to see how you turned it around. I hope I can learn to handle things as well as you do." Clara smiled, touched by the sentiment. "You're already on the right path, Mia. Just remember, every interaction is an opportunity to grow." Meanwhile, Daniel's efforts to lead by example had earned him widespread respect within and beyond the aviation industry. His decision to handle the incident with patience and grace had sparked conversations about the role of leaders in setting the tone for their organizations. Business magazines lauded his approach, and he was frequently invited to speak at leadership summits. Despite the attention, Daniel remained focused on his mission, creating an airline that prioritized fairness, innovation, and a sense of community. He continued to engage with employees at all levels, often flying anonymously on his own planes to experience the service firsthand. On more than one occasion, he witnessed the positive impact of the changes he had helped implement, from flight attendants diffusing tense situations with poise to passengers expressing gratitude for the airline's inclusive atmosphere. One such moment occurred during a flight to Denver. Seated in the economy cabin, Daniel observed a young woman struggling to fit her carry-on bag into the overhead compartment. A fellow passenger made a curt remark about her holding up the line, and she looked visibly flustered. Before Daniel could intervene, a flight attendant stepped in, her tone calm and reassuring. "Let me help you with that," the flight attendant said, smiling warmly. She adjusted the bag and ensured it was securely stowed. Then she turned to the other passenger and added, "Thank you for your patience. We're all trying to get where we're going." The interaction diffused the tension instantly, and the young woman smiled in relief. Watching from his seat, Daniel felt a swell of pride. This was exactly the kind of environment he had envisioned, one where kindness and professionalism triumphed over negativity. As time went on, the incident that had brought Clara and Daniel together faded from public memory, replaced by newer headlines and controversies. But for those who had been directly involved, its lessons endured. Clara continued to grow in her role, eventually transitioning into a leadership position within the airline's training department. Her influence extended far beyond her own team, shaping the company's culture in ways that would leave a lasting legacy. Daniel, too, found that the experience had changed him. Though he had always been a thoughtful and principled leader, the incident reminded him of the importance of humility and active listening. It deepened his commitment to fostering a workplace where everyone felt valued and respected, regardless of their background or beliefs. The two remained in occasional contact, exchanging emails and meeting at industry events. Though their lives had taken different paths, they shared a mutual respect and gratitude for the unexpected journey they had embarked on together. Years later, Clara found herself back on a plane, not as a flight attendant but as a passenger. She was flying to Seattle to speak at a conference on leadership and resilience. As the plane cruised at 35,000 feet, she gazed out the window, reflecting on how far she had come since that fateful day. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a passenger behind her, engaged in a heated discussion about politics. The man's tone was agitated, and Clara could sense the discomfort of those seated nearby. For a moment, she considered intervening, but then she noticed a flight attendant approach the man with a calm and confident demeanor. "Sir," the flight attendant said, her voice steady and kind, "I understand you feel strongly about this, but let's keep the conversation respectful for everyone's comfort. If there's anything I can do to make your flight more enjoyable, please let me know." The man paused, seeming taken aback by the flight attendant's professionalism. After a moment, he nodded and settled back into his seat. The tension dissipated, and the cabin returned to its usual hum of quiet activity. Clara smiled to herself, feeling a sense of quiet satisfaction. The ripple effects of her journey were still being felt, carried forward by others who had embraced the values she had worked so hard to champion. As the plane began its descent, Clara closed her eyes, ready to continue her work, empowered by the knowledge that even the smallest actions could create lasting change. As the plane touched down in Seattle, Clara gathered her thoughts, reflecting on the journey ahead. Her work had evolved beyond anything she'd imagined when she first donned her flight attendant uniform years ago. The conference she was attending was a prestigious one, attracting leaders from a variety of industries to discuss strategies for fostering resilience, empathy, and innovation in their organizations. Clara's role as a speaker was proof of how far she had come, a transformation born from a moment that could have derailed her career. When Clara arrived at the conference venue, the energy was palpable. Attendees mingled in the lobby, exchanging ideas and stories, and Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose. The event organizers greeted her warmly, guiding her to a backstage area where she could prepare for her talk. She reviewed her notes, although the story she planned to tell was so deeply ingrained in her memory that she hardly needed them. Clara's session was scheduled for mid-afternoon, a coveted slot that ensured a large audience. As the moment approached, she felt the familiar flutter of nerves but steadied herself with a deep breath. Walking onto the stage, she was greeted by a packed auditorium. The applause as she stepped up to the microphone was a humbling reminder of the impact her story had already made. She began by recounting the incident that had brought her to this point, sparing no detail about her own missteps and the lessons they had taught her. But as the speech progressed, Clara shifted focus, speaking passionately about the broader implications of her experience. "We often think of mistakes as something to be avoided at all costs," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "But I've learned that mistakes can be our greatest teachers. if we have the courage to face them honestly. In my case, I had to confront my own assumptions and biases, and that wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Clara then pivoted to discuss how organizations could create environments that encouraged growth through accountability and empathy. She shared stories from her work with the airline, illustrating how the training programs she had helped implement had transformed the way employees approach their roles. It's not just about preventing conflict, she said. It's about fostering understanding. When we create spaces where people feel heard and valued, we're not just solving problems, we're building connections that transcend differences. By the time Clara concluded her talk, the audience was on their feet, applauding not just her words, but the authenticity and vulnerability with which she had shared her journey. As she left the stage, she was approached by several attendees eager to discuss how her insights could be applied to their own organizations. One of those attendees was a young entrepreneur named Alex, who had recently launched a tech startup. Alex explained that his company was struggling with internal communication issues, and he wanted Clara's advice on fostering a culture of mutual respect. Clara listened intently before offering a thoughtful response. "Start by modeling the behavior you want to see," she said. "Be open about your own mistakes and what you've learned from them. When people see that vulnerability, it creates a ripple effect." The conversation with Alex reminded Clara of why she had embraced this new chapter in her life. It wasn't just about sharing her story, it was about empowering others to navigate their own challenges with courage and grace. As the conference wrapped up, Clara left with a sense of fulfillment and optimism. The journey that had begun on that turbulent flight so many years ago had taken her to unexpected places, and she knew it was far from over. There were more conversations to be had, more lessons to share, and more lives to touch. And as she boarded her flight home, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the mistakes that had shaped her and the opportunities that lay ahead. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on the flight attendant's actions toward the man with the MAGA hat? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.